in the settlement that came to be known as Jos, who told him that the name of that settlement is Gwash. So the early history of these groups, to me, shows more of unity than the current division that we have.
Yeah. So, just as in many other places, Mr. Ali is not Mr. Ali, it's Mr. Allen.
All right, beginning with the name Jos. Usually, I have some versions on how the name Jos came about. We've heard it in informal discussions. You hear different versions, and we know when it comes to history, names are very important. They are very important. In fact, they are part of what defines us as people.
When Colonel Los, first arrived Jos in the settlement that came to be known as Jos. If you read his report and his remark, he says he met a local pagan, which means the person was not a Hausa who had some knowledge of Hausa, who he used as an interpreter, who told him that the name of that settlement is Gwash. And I have opted to adopt it because if Law's story of it is correct, and we know several of his stories and so on about Plato, because he is, as they call him, he is the uncrowned conqueror of Plato or Jos. The others, I suspect we have to be very careful about adopting them because they may have inclinations towards contemporary contestations about the ownership of Jos. That's why I've decided to adopt that of Colonel Laws. And then, with regards to its antiquity, I can't say in precise term when it was established, but it would appear that it was established fairly long enough for it to be having interactions with the Hausawa that were in what we now know as Lamingo and further down to as you approach the plains, the Dalma area and Ruruwe and Rishi and all those other places. There is some suggestion that its physical location was around behind the current museum, around the Central Bank of Nigeria. I have avoided tucking them in those manners.
Okay, all right.
I because I know the implications for politics of the place. But let us say that's the area. Whether the name Gwash or Jot or whatever it is, we now know that there was such a settlement, and that this is roughly the area. I think this much we can say. I don't know whether my colleague has run into some information that is able to date exactly when such a settlement will have come into being, but surely it predated colonial rule.
Okay, Prof, talking about contemporary contestations as regards Jos, and then, or let's say place names.
Yes.
I read a thesis in Abu Zaria some few years back. I think I wouldn't want to give the name of who wrote it. And he was talking about not just necessarily, but about the Anaguta. Yes. And he was trying to give a historical background of the Anaguta area and how the name Anaguta evolved. He now said there was a man who journeyed from Kano to Jos, and he arrived on a day that it was raining. So when people asked him what happened, he said Tanarke. And Tanarke, in that context, he was trying to say that he got drenched. And that was how the name from Tanarke became Naraguta. So are we seeing a situation where probably based on contemporary contestations, names are being, names are being distorted, maybe for certain reasons?
I'm hearing this for the first time.
Okay.
But my own understanding of Tanarke in Hausa means melting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Which is different from being soaked in water.
Yes.
You get the point I'm making?
Yes, Prof.
Yeah. But
What is Jiku?
Yeah.
exactly. So again, but I don't want to throw it away. Let us say it is one of the stories about the origin of Narguta.
All right. All right.
But
okay.
I sincerely have my strong reservations about its believability.
In addition to that, you mentioned two names. One is Jot and one is Gouache.
Yes.
So the Jot came from which angle, and then the Gouache, you've explained, one of the earliest, is it Europeans who arrived and he met, you said, yes.
I think
so
I got the Jot one of the earliest studies of Jos.
Okay.
I think that's where I got the Jot.
That's interesting.
Well, talking about early settlements, usually what dominates most literature, where we see is they give the impression as if a place is just empty, vacant, and then suddenly people start moving in, into the area, and they began to occupy that place, suddenly. When you go to Gouache, all these places, there have been people there. So I don't know whether, if there's a way, let's expatiate on early settlements before the coming of Europeans in Jos metropolis. So before we now even talk of the particular place that has been attributed to where the modern Jos sprang out of. So I'm using the word modern in quotes. Thank you.
Well, again, I think you are right. The thing is that I didn't pay much attention to this aspect of the history in terms of the specific settlements prior to European conquest. But certainly, they existed. If you read Nengel's thesis, especially in that northern Pengana region and so on. And again, even the tin, that gets to be known, they were indigenous miners. Lest we forget, I think the first discovery of not the first discovery. Tin straw was first seen by, when the river Benue was opened up, Niger, Benue, those rivers by traders, by European travelers. And so it was first sighted at Loco. Loco would now be, is it in total local government of area, it's a river port.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how they first saw it, Europeans. And then they trace, where it will have come from and so on and so forth. So surely you are right. We may not know the specific settlements and their names, but they certainly existed. And the knowledge of smelting iron, was also known.
So
no matter
good.
how crude it may have been at that level.
So it's good we lay emphasis on this for the record.
Yes.
There were several existing settlements
There was,
before commercial exploration of tin by the Europeans in Jos. That's one. So, and then before the coming of the Europeans, people in Jos already had the knowledge of exploitation of tin and as well processing it.
We learned that after the jihad of, is it 1804? And then when, one of the jihadists in the Bauchi area called Adamu Oso wanted to wage a war on some of the tribes up on the plateau, that the tribes did not, or there was no single tribe that presented itself to face him. Instead, they team up. So it simply means the people were staying somewhere in proximity to each other for them to have realized the external threat, and then they had to team up to now face him. And according to some historical narratives, they were able to repel that attack from the Bauchi area. Yes. So I was thinking there might have been some, names of places that these particular, tribes that, moved into one to face him. I don't know if there were names of places, because we later on realized that there is, again, an internal struggle or an internal issue, amongst the tribes, again, as in who is dominant or who owns Jos and the rest of them. So we want to understand some of these, controversies.
Well, these later controversies, I think they came much later. Otherwise, the coming together, the union of the various tribes to ward off the jihad would not have occurred. You get the point I'm making. So if there was such, divisions among them, at least they saw themselves as one in certain respects. Exactly. That's how they form an alliance to ward off the jihadist attack from Bauchi. I think this jihad was conducted by Emir Ibrahim, the son of Yakubu. Yakubu himself had died. I think died. Yes, but he was succeeded by Ibrahim in, I think, 1843.
1843.
Yes.
That's interesting.
And if you read, by the way, how many of you have read this history, ownership of Jos and so on?
You have
the Pidan book.
Yes, the Pidan book. Yes.
Yes.
Nengel talks about, and he's quoting from the gazetteers, where the Aji and Bauchi, they are the ones who are rendering this particular war narrative, how they were defeated, because the combination of the armed forces of the Birom, Puji, and Aguta, Afizere, and so on, they lured them into the as you go down, what do we call this gorge? The Dilimi gorge.
Yeah, yes. Dilimi, yeah.
And the houses on their own, the leader, I think the Madaki or the Galadim, he gives the number of the losses that they incurred. I think about 45 and so on and so forth, and how many donkeys they lost and so on and so forth. It's all there in that account. So the early history of these groups, to me, shows more of unity than the current division that we have.
Okay, thank you very much. Prof has elaborately and eloquently spoken to the issue of the origin of the name Jos. I have also come just across the two, and the Gouache thing is a colonial name, and of course that was what the Colonel Laws was told by the person he met. Now, you should remember that in many locations in Plateau State, very few have indigenous names. Some have two names, and you read that from Isichi, a Hausa name and a local name. So Jos is the only place that doesn't have two names. It only has that Jos, which is said to be corruption of Gouache. So what this means is that that name was not given by outsiders, but it was given by those who own the place, at least the persons they met there. And this means that it was already occupied. But you know, before colonialism, Plateau people generally, and people in the Middle Belt, were not urbanized. We were farmers and hills dwellers. So they came down to the plains only to farm. But most of their residences were on the hills, and that's why that place where the Afizere memorialized as Gwash is a hill. Now, if you look at the Birom narrative, I've just completed and submitted my manuscript on the history of all the ethnic groups in Plateau State, the 56 ethnic groups. I just submitted the manuscript to JosJist University Press this morning before coming here.
Wow.
So if you look at that, you will find out that each ethnic group has a tradition of origin. Now, the Anaguta say they came from Sherry Hills. That's their own narrative. And that their leader was called Uguta, and it was male and female, and that they gave birth to children who now call Anaguta. So it's from the word Uguta, not from whatever you call Tanarki. Completely they are opposites. So the Anaguta, they say their ancestor was Uguta, and they derive their ethnic name from that their ancestor, Uguta. And by the time of colonial rule, they were already in their Anaguta hills. So it is the Hausa that now corrupted Anaguta to Naraguta. So it's not Naraguta, it's Anaguta. And then they say Naraguta. So just as in many other places, you know, Mr. Ali, it's not Mr. Ali, it's Mr. Allen.
Yes.
Federe is Mr. Frederick.
Wow. This is interesting.
Now, this, because the Hausa people had very long stay in the mines, so they had the opportunity to change the names of the locals. But because Cornelos had documented Jos, it was difficult for them to change. But when they came, already there was a tiny Hausa settlement at Naraguta. And that was after the defeat of the Hausa people, the jihadis. So they now came as traders. So that Naraguta Hausa settlement has the same status as Zangon Kataf.
Oh.
It is a trader settlement, not the settlement of people who own the place. So they came there to trade because they linked the people here with those in Bauchi and others. So that is part of the contestation about we were here before colonial rule.
Yeah.
But they were defeated. The jihadist forces were defeated in 1873. That is what is properly documented. And so it was after that defeat that they now came as traders and stayed in Naraguta to do their trade. Now, for the Birom, I'm entering the controversy now.
Yeah. And we want to hear the
For the Birom, you know, the Birom have various versions of their origin. And one of the versions say they were part of the Aturi complex. One day, I was taken there by Professor Ningel and Yahud. I hope I can trace. One day I can. It's a cave.
Yeah.
It's a cave. It's a rock shelter, as we call it.
Yeah.
So they say that place was the habitat of so many ethnic groups. So many of the Pengana groups, many of the Rukuba groups, many of the... So part of the Birom say they were part of that Aturu complex, and it is said to have existed about 1000 AD. So it's about contemporary with the Nok culture. So the Birom of Du, that is their own origin. And that is why you cannot say the Birom don't own Kabong. When people say they don't, I don't understand it. So this is pure politics. So the Afizere, we already know that their pillar in Gwash. The Anaguta were in their so-called Naraguta hills. So this is why everyone recognizes them as the indigenous of Jos. So they were in those locations prior to colonial rule. But because they were not urban settlements, you cannot say Jos as it is, because Jos today is wider than that Gwash area.
Exactly.
Naraguta is a little bit small,
Yes.
and it has not been expanded. But the concept of Jos, in our CC Mass, we're going to teach history of Jos as a course. And these are some of the issues that we will be bringing up. So it is a fact that people existed in this place that is today metropolitan Jos, and also Jos town, before the coming of colonial rule. These were the people, together with their neighbors, the Rukuba, the Buji, that fought the jihadists in 1873. So, for the origin of the name Jos, we rely on colonial laws. For whether people lived here, yes, they lived here. They lived at that Gwash, they lived at that Aturu complex, they lived at Naraguta Hills. There were people there who go by the name Afizire for Gwash, Anaguta for Naraguta Hills, and Kabong Aturu complex for the Birom group. But the Birom were not the only ones in the Aturu complex. So that is very, very clear about what we can say about whether people lived in this place that is today called Jos or not before the coming of colonial rule.
Thank you so much, Prof. This is really inciting. And I think at this point we'll move to the next issues, which have to do with pre-colonial teen exploration. I know, Prof, you gave a little background about it, but I think we need to talk more about it.
Tin mining and smelting was taking place prior to colonialism, and some of the areas that have been mentioned are Rishi.
Yes.
I don't know where Rishi is. They also mentioned Rousseau.
Yes.
Apart from Rousseau, they mentioned Tilden Fulani.
Yes.
And of course, we could take Tilden Fulani as part of a larger Jos, because it's just about a boundary adjustment that we now have some of these areas. But maybe the practice of iron smelting and other issues happened there. And then again, for mentioning your discovery of furnaces, I think furnaces have been discovered at Rukuba Road. And of course, yes, we've not been able to establish whether they were used for smelting iron or smelting tin. I think these are two different things. And at the same time, coincidentally, there was a day I was, my car had a problem. I just have to say it here. And I was looking for an electrician to fix it. And when I went down at Holshe, not 500, maybe 300 meters away from one of the students, I was surprised to see two furnaces, and the furnaces are still there. The outline is still there. And this thing happened last year. So it's like we have some of these archaeological evidences which we could check to ascertain, the period that, maybe tin was smelted or whatever. So we have a lot of such things. And we're told that traditionally, in the past, at a point, not only iron manila, that is all those smelted ingots or whatever,
Yes.
that initially it was from tin and not from iron. So that points to, it attests to the fact that maybe iron smelting was taking place prior to the arrival of the colonialists. And like you said, a particular part of it was found at Loko, and Loko is in Nasarawa State, which is quite a distance from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also
Okay, before Prof comments.
at the point of sales exchange.
Wow.
Showing that it had now entered the international market.
Wow, that's quite interesting. That's
Okay,
quite
before
interesting.
Prof elaborates, there is this theory that historians have that many of the indigenous ethnic groups in Plateau might be descendants of the makers of the Nok culture. And it's precisely because of these discoveries we are talking about. So when you read our oral histories, Ron people say they came from Borno, Mogavul people say they came from Borno, everybody from Plateau say they came from Borno. And you wonder how large Borno was. And if Borno was where everybody came from, what was the name of the village that they came from? But we all know that we came from Jelbang, from Dai, and so on.
Yes.
So this is to tie the story of these indigenous discoveries to some of the claims that you find in oral literature, saying that we came from Borno, we came from Yemen, and so on. But then, if you look at, you are archaeologists, if you go to the Jos Museum, go and compare the pots from your village with that one, then you say you are not no culture that you came from Borno. Do they look like the ones from Borno? Look at your material culture. So definitely tin was mined in this area, in the Jos Plateau area, particularly in what we now call Plateau North.
Yeah.
Tin was mined there. And in my PhD, which I published, I listed some of the names of where they were mined and smelted. Okay. And I can read them. Some of the pre-colonial tin mining sites included Rishi, Gaskori, Rousseau, Tilden Fulani, Narabi, Jimpi, Ganye, all had tin deposits. Dalma was a major smelting site. That's right. But it was a major smelting site. Now, when people say tin was discovered by Europeans, it wasn't. And I quote from Mr. Stobart, who said, Mr. Stobart reports from findings at Rock of various forms of smelted tin spirals, which experts assure him must have been the work of some former race. No one can trace these people except relics discovered in the beds of the streams. These were pre-colonial mining activities taking place. In most of it was not the type that we now see today. They were done at riversides, in valleys. Yes. They were using calabashes and local tools, hoes. So the mine, it was not deep sea mining. It was not the mechanized type. So the scale was very, very small. And what were they using the tin for? They were using it to paste their knives. Because, as you know, as archaeologists and scientists, the tin is a non-corrosive metal. Yes. So their iron objects, they use the tin to paste it to prevent it from rusting. So it had very limited use in terms of exports because it had local uses. It was the Europeans that discovered that oil, since it's a non-corrosive metal, we can use it to make aircraft engines. We can use it to make tin paste. We can use it to make tubes. So these materials, tin cans for milk and for beverages, for foods, they are pasted with tin. That's what Europeans use it in the industrial process. But the local people had been using it, mining the tin around their rivers, gullies, and streams. So it's not a European creation. And if this is what Mr. Stobart said, he is linking the tin mining as far back as the Nok culture era. So it's a very old practice here in this place. Okay. So what the colonials did was to commercialize it and make it an industrial activity, which will come on later. Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe Prof will say more.
No, just like you said, I have no doubt in my mind that the knowledge of tin smelting and processing is far back in time and is not introduced by Europeans, and so they just modernized it. As an undergraduate, there's lectures in prehistory and archaeology. Thurston Shaw.
Thurston Shaw.
You know, he has this, I think is it chapter 2, was it the coming of iron, and the subsection to it is Nok and Daima, because he was comparing Nok and Daima in Bornu, and so on and so forth. And it is these same kinds of things he is talking about in terms of the processing of tin, iron, and other related minerals. So that's why I'm saying I have no iota of doubt about the indigeneity of this knowledge of smelting and so on by indigenous groups. Like he reeled out, these villages really were rishid and so on and so forth. We may not know the specific entrepreneurs in those places, but at least we should be able to say that in these communities the knowledge of smelting was known.
All right.
Trade in them locally was known, which eventually became internationalized. And that's how it got to local. Because by that time, the Royal Niger Company had opened up the Niger and the Benue. And so local is a river port. Okay?
Okay.
So we can say that much. And you know, in terms of the knowledge of iron processing and smelting, I'd like to add that if you in the archival files, there's a picture of a smelter in and it carries that title. You know, of a smelter in Dalma, Ruru and Dalma, and so on. So, and if you, even as recent, Freud's study, he also make references to these villages and the antiquity of you know, iron processing. You know, the association of Hausawa to these things has to do with what we must concede about them in terms of they are experts in exchange, in trade.
Trade, yes.
Really. And
yes.
they can Hausanize any item, you know.
Yes.
And so on, including even place names, like we are saying.
Yes.
And so on. But from the drawings that I have seen in the archives and what we are discussing and field interviews, and then the Charles Goyok that you were talking about, both in his BA thesis, which is the coming of gas, colonial rule in Gasland, and then his PhD. I ended up, although we were colleagues, but I ended up overseeing it because my supervisor was also his supervisor, and I finished before him.
Wow.
So the knowledge of iron and trading in it, I think is fairly, finding it in local may be traceable to Hausa traders, and so on and so forth. But in terms of where it was produced, it is those settlements that
produce them.
Okay.
The colonial documents include Bisichi.
Bisichi, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
In those places where documented tin mining and smelting, not just tin mining and smelting. Yes,
That's interesting.
so we're just mentioning the communities where tin mining and smelting took place, not all the places where tin mining took place, because they were in river around the rivers.
Yes.
Wow.
It's like he said, all of them were initially concentrated in Jos North as you descend the plateau. It was George Nicholas, a mining engineer, who discovered that the richer tin deposits lay to the south of Jos North, you know, Do area and so on, right to your area, run and so on and so forth. Yes, and that's what informed, you know, a lot of the concentration and the timing of Kanalo's conquest.
Wow. Maybe the additional thing is that it is this tin determination that has, you know, kept on moving the government station, the government headquarters. They started at Naraguta, then moved to Lumwada, then moved to Rayfield. No, from yes, that's how they kept on moving. And it was also as soon as they found tin here, they moved the headquarters there. But they couldn't reach Bukuru because much of the Bukuru area was given as EPL, exclusive prospecting licenses. So, as we will come to know, by 1913, there were 120 expatriate mining companies here.
Wow.
By 1914, there were 200 expatriate mining companies within this area. So you can see the expanse, the scope of mining. So 200 mining companies, each with an EPL. So it wasn't. So they just restricted them here and then leased out those places for mining, and that's why the mining reached down to Darfur, to Bokos area, and it ended at Manguhale. So they went to Pangshin thinking that all the highlands had tin. It was futile. They couldn't find tin in Pangshin, so we were saved.
This is really inciting and interesting, and this takes us to another interesting section of this discussion, which has to do with the beginning of European exploration of tin in Jos, and then the transformation of Jos into a metropolitan city. Jos, as at then, used to be the way Niger Delta was to Nigeria. Because I know I've read it, it got to a point that Jos produced up to 90% of total tin export from Nigeria. And with the world wars, I think it should be the Second World War or so, when England or the Britons lost the Malaysia. They lost Malaysia to the Japanese. So Nigeria became their major source of tin, and even their weaponry. In their weaponry, they needed tin. Their airplane, as you mentioned earlier, So, I maybe for humor's sake, football lovers, there are some, they'll say they are Liverpool lovers, they love Liverpool, they love Manchester. Do you know that Liverpool was the port where this tin was transported into? So you can say just contributed in building the Liverpool you support today. Manchester, England,
producing industries were in Birmingham. The iron producing industries were in Birmingham and other places, and tin contributed to that. So part of what we see as England or Britain today, the resources, the money comes from here. I remembered they mentioned the first billionaire from Nigeria, somebody Fernandez, and they said he started his business coming to present Plateau State or Jos and buying tin and then exporting it to other countries, including US.
Certainly, it was very lucrative. There's no doubt about it.
It was, and that's why if you get Gonyok's PhD, it tells you the tin statistics every year from 1903 to 1960, the annual output. Bill Friends starts from 1914. So Gonyok's work complements his own, and it will tell you the statistics year by year, the output and the number of laborers that were brought into the tin fields.
Wow.
So the world wars were the peak. World War I and World War II were the peak of tin production in this Jos Plateau. So the contribution of this place to world civilization and world development is just enormous.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Another thing I think we would like to know is the fact that, during the colonial period when tin was being mined, we get to understand that a lot of tribes moved in, and that must have, somehow, what do I say? How do I put it? That must have brought in, maybe some social issues associated with the relationship these people have. I don't know what you can tell us about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no doubt about, given the output that he's talking about in both Gonyok and Freund, it wasn't just the mining companies attracting labor based on market forces. No. The regulatory function of government and government hand in the recruitment of the laborers was also there. I know that at the height of it, almost from start, because it was the dominant source of external revenue in northern region, each of the provinces was allotted specific quotas to bring into the mines. You spend 3 months, then another province takes over.
Okay.
Oh yes, it was.
I thought it was an individual.
No.
So
It's like you're looking for a job and then you go.
So let me read some of the statistics from Bill Friend.
Yes.
For 1942, the number of laborers from Bauchi in the first September 1942 was 3,500.
Wow.
From Benue, 8,000. From Borno, 3,000. From Kano, 2,000.
Yes.
From Katsina, 2,000. From Niger, 1,500. From Plateau, 2,500. From Sokoto, 3,500. From Zaria, 4,000. These were forced labor conscripts that
Exactly.
those provinces must produce this number of people. This is for 1942 alone.
1942.
Alone.
Wow.
And this is something that started since 1903 because, forced labor was much in vogue until 1933 when it was banned by the ILO. But under the regime of the world wars, they brought back what was called political labor, what is called Ibangomna.
Ibangomna.
Yes.
Okay.
So it was under this regime of political labor that these provinces were forced to bring this number of laborers. This is just for 1 quarter. So if you look at the statistics annually, so this means that Bauchi must repeat this 4 times a year. All these provinces must repeat this number of laborers 4 times a year.
But you said, you quoted
This is Bill Friend.
Jos or Plateau contributing how many? 2,000.
Yes.
Yeah, Plateau.
But there is this notion, there is this contemporary notion that Plateau people don't go into business that much. And then people have argued that some of the complacency or attitude of Plateau people is tied to the colonial policy, especially with the advent of tin mining, that at a point what they were doing was that they were bringing laborers from outside because they believe if they are to engage a lot of Plateau people, there will be scarcity of food. So in one way or the other, the Plateau people were segregated against so that they will be producing the food that the laborers coming from other places will eat, or food will be expensive and then the mining companies will now have to pay very high wages. So I don't know if that can be taken at face value as a situation where economically the Plateau people were, denied certain, rights to, participating in tin mining.
No. I disagree with your theory of, to start with, the idea of original complacency of Plateau people is unfounded.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe I withdraw that word.
Yes,
Complacency.
but in terms of historical participation in the tin industry as miners, the Plateau people played both roles. They as you can see, they also produce the quota assigned to them by government, but they also were also encouraged because of proximity to provide voluntary labor. Okay. Because they can, especially in the dry season, instead of the usual hunting and all these sorts of things,
Yes.
and on the pressure of colonial taxation,
Yes.
it became the quickest thing to go and spend 2 weeks, 3 weeks in the tin mines
Get money and go and pay
to
tax.
get money for tax and return to the village.
Yeah.
So it's both, and it is their participation that was it tended to be reduced, because when the quantum of these other northern provinces are put together vis-a-vis the number that is arriving from Plateau, then the Plateau, it looks small.
Very small.
Yes, but you are comparing it with 12 other provinces. You get.
Yes.
So the idea of, that's why I'm saying the idea of complacency doesn't arise.
Okay.
Because we now had in fact, if anything, they labored hardest because they were producing, they were producing the voluntary type that I have just described, and then they were also meeting their government quotas.
And they were producing food that other laborers were eating.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Maybe what I can add here is that, as Prof said, Plateau was divided into two. The highlands, Plateau Central to Plateau North, were called labor reserves. These were the areas where the quotas for Plateau was left. Then the southern provinces that were formerly under Muri,
province,
that they joined us in 1926 to become one province. Now, the southern areas were food reserves because they had land to produce food. So their own quota was to bring grains to the mines. So they didn't suffer the quota system that Pangshin Division, JosJist Division, and what we today call Plateau Central and Plateau North suffered. They had that double tragedy. So the reason why they focused on Plateau North and Plateau Central was that our lands were not so fertile to produce cash crops. But in the southern zone, they could produce groundnuts, which was a cash crop in the colonial economy.
Yes.
We and cotton, we didn't have that. So they said, okay, we are very poor, so we will be laborers. And that is why they now said, to improve our economy, they introduced vegetable farming. They introduced Irish potato cultivation. It was first imported by JosJist Division, and then it was they first tried it at race course before it became this thing. So they said, we have to supplement these people's incomes with this way. So you have to go to the mines to get money to pay your tax, and if you don't want to, if you escape the quota, then either you sell cash crop, and that cash crop is either Irish potato or vegetables, which Europeans wanted.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So this was how the economy was structured. Central, North, labor reserves. South, agricultural economy.
Wow. That's quite wonderful. That's wonderful.
It's really interesting that these issues that we are discussing, because it lays the foundation of JosJist we know today. So how can we say, how did all these happenings and all these different colonial settlements being established, how did they evolve into the present day JosJist?
Okay. For you to get that story, you need to see this book by Anthony Bingel. It's the one that tells you how JosJist metamorphosed from one street to the other to whatever it became up to 1972. Yes. So this book chronicles just from the Battle of Rafinjaki up to 1972 when this material was published. Now, what you see there is that, as we said, the indigenous people were hills dwellers. Tin mining brought complications. If you imported people from all the 12 northern provinces, the demographic situation of JosJist just changed. From 1903, when you started importing laborers, apart from those from Pangshin to come to JosJist, those from Mangu to come to JosJist, those from Bokos to come to JosJist, those from Rukuba to come to JosJist, from Plateau alone, and then from Benue, from Katsina, all those provinces. Yes. So if you put that population for 3 months in one place, so for that of 1942, for example, for September, the total of imported laborers was 30,000. 30,000.
As far back as that period.
That's for one quarter. That's just for one quarter, for 3 months. 30,000. So if you have 30,000 people in a place, it's like what we experience today. They say, Macham, go for studies abroad. The place look nice, you stay there. Many of the laborers didn't go back.
Exactly.
They decided to stay because there were opportunities. And in 1915, JosJist was officially declared a town. And in 1917, by government evidence, it was properly established as Jostown, a city.
1915.
Yes. But the ordinance was in 1917.
That's over 100 years.
Yes, so by that time, government had seen the cosmopolitan nature of the population all over Nigeria, because while the laborers were coming from the north, the 12 provinces of the north, skilled laborers, engineers were coming from the south.
And artisans.
And artisans were coming from the south through the railway. And that's why Jos had an early development of railway to this place. By 1920s, railway was already here. So that was bringing people from the south. So that is why you have a lot of even miners from this old Bendel state.
Yes.
Many of them keyed into the mining with the companies. So by 1917, 1926, Jos had almost everybody on the surface of the earth. Europeans, Americans,
Arabs.
No, Arabs were not in that category. But these basic people, and then almost every Nigerian ethnic group was here. So they established the Hausa and the northern people. They kept on moving with the discovery of tin. Some from Naraguta, they followed the Europeans to Dilimi. From Dilimi, they followed them to Tudunwada. So anywhere a new mining place was opened, they were following them there. In any case, they were going to be dropped there. And so if you see some of the settlements today, you will find out that they have those old colonial structures, mining camps. This was where they were staying. And so some of them did not go back home because the opportunities here were bigger. And then with Jos becoming, by ordinance, a town by 1917, it now opened new commercial opportunities for trade. So on the mines, as Gonyok documents, you will find gamblers. They were they were doing their business.
It's always part of
prostitutes.
Any mining.
Prostitutes were doing their business. Beer sellers were doing their business. Food sellers were doing their business. All over the mining camps. And with the creation of Plateau Province in 1926, with Jos as headquarters, what else can you say? It just became a heterogeneous thing. So every people that came, and you read that from Plotnikov, strangers to the city, urban man in Jos. It tells you how the different ethnic communities, when they came, they will look for their cohort and stay with them because they provided succor. So any student of mine who is studying Jos, that's the first literature review. Plotnikov, strangers to the city, urban man. So the Yoruba people stayed in their own enclave, and they will welcome their Yoruba cohort. The Igbos stayed in their own. So you see that Jos had some ethnic coloration to the demographic structure. So Nasarawa was basically Igbo, Yoruba. Tafawa Balewa and the Puye was basically Igbo and Niger Delta.
Wow.
Then Dilimi was basically Hausa. So with the indigenes, they will bring them. After the 3 months, everyone will go back to their family. Our people never stayed on the mines. They went back. So in part of this history of Plateau that I did, in my village, every person of my father's generation has a Hausa name. That's the origin of Umaru in my father's name. His name is not Umaru. My uncle, his name is Tokan. They gave him Dogo.
He was tall.
Yes, he was
Probably.
tall. My wife's father, his name is Toklong. They gave him Jatau. Every person. So, but they went back to their villages. But most of the people, some of those that were imported as mining laborers or those that came to the railways never went back. And so you have the cosmopolitan Jos that you have today. That's my own small understanding.
Wow.
No, you're correct.
That's quite interesting. In fact, this is
You have
one of the most educative discussion we've had about the history of Jos.
In Zaria.
Yes, I was born there.
I'm just reinforcing the arrival of the railways.
Yes.
By 1914, the construction started from the Zaria end.
Okay.
In 1911, it reached Jos, 1914. So by 1920, when he was talking, it was already an established this thing.
That was the eastern line.
Yes.
That was the
And
second
then
line.
the completion of the Makurdi Bridge, you know. I'm raising this as major infrastructural issues that cause trade and exchange to blossom. If you are in Zaria, if you are in Aminu Road, you get it.
Is it towards Sabongari?
In Sabongari.
Okay,
It's the
Sabongari.
main Sabon. If before you get the roundabout to turn to Tobacco,
Oh, okay.
on your right, that street is called Dogon Bauchi.
Oh.
That's the railway line because Zaria was the headquarters of the railway.
Okay.
Okay, if you are now in Jos, the street that we now have, I think it's Ofodume, just behind Ola.
Ola Hospital.
Yes, that road is an original rail line.
Oh.
Okay.
Yes, that that's the Jos end of it. The Aminu Road, the Dogon Bauchi, if you are in Zaria, that's the Zaria end of it.
Wow.
Okay.
Yes. So, and the railway was constructed essentially because of the tin industry. And if you look at some of the old books, what's this history of Nigeria? Alan Burns. If you see the picture of some of these, you see naked carriers carrying tin from Jos to Rigachuku.
In Kaduna, in
Yes,
present
and so
Kaduna
on and
State.
so forth. And then the establishment of the tin industry, when it boomed, it led to the establishment of other national institutions, such as the post office.
Okay.
Yes, the workers of those types, of those kinds of institutions, also augmented and provided the kind of cosmopolitans that made up Jos. Like he has pointed out, it's not something that is colonial in nature. It is still taking place. When you visit a new area, whether it's Kano or Lagos, wherever your first instinct is to locate your people.
Yes.
And when you do, they are the ones that will get you fixed.
And you feel at home.
Yes, and so on. Eventually, you and things like that. And if you read Enoch's thesis and so on and so forth, urbanization, this is the genesis of these tribal unions in various places.
Okay.
And then even at the national level, you are confronted with that as you read James Coleman. When you begin to read about the history of Nigerian nationalism, it is these cohorts that now begin to, amalgamate and form, agitation areas against the British and so on. So the cosmopolitan nature of Jos started from the word go.
Wow.
Yes, as a result of this tin industry.
Tin industry.
Because it is internationally linked to international developments.
Yeah.
Okay? So, at the end of the day, the Hausa, in quote, because this thing we call Hausa actually is an amalgam of all manner of things. Kanuris are not Hausas, Nupes are not Hausas, Terawas are, but this is how we gum them, lump them together, and we call their elite Hausa Fulani. Hausa Fulani is not an ethnic name. It's a media description. Okay?
For political convenience?
Yes, and so on. But because they are part and parcel of the northern establishment as a region, they saw themselves as owners of they lay claim to, some form of indigeneity more than the Southerners, but in view of that. And then as time goes on, you remember, they because they speak Hausa, which is the language you communicate to the natives. That's why they took these names, because the names are given by these people. They were the headmen of these laborers and the labor camps, and so on, for the European companies. And that's why a lot of the companies, such settlements, such camps, they take on the names of the headman or the person producing some specific social services, Barakin Ladi, Adiko, and all these sorts of things, describing some of the functions that have built up in these labor settlements or labor camps, if you like. So the urbanity of Jos was not just northern, truly. It was national. Igbos are there, Yorubas there, Benis are there, Isekiris are there, and so on and so forth, depending on the kind of skill that you have.
All right.
Maybe in addition, the whites thought that they were going to be here for a very long time. And so they wanted to have a place that is very close to Europe, and that's why it just became more popular for the white elite. And that's why you have a lot of missionary establishments here. Many of the missionary organizations have their headquarters here, because they wanted to live in this place. So that's how they built Hillcrest School. That's how they built Hill Station Hotel. That's how they built Masala Chinjuma. Right in they said they wanted to improve the architectural beauty of the town. That's why they built Masala
Chinjuma. Was built by the colonial.
Yes, it was built in the colonial period, and it was just to improve the infrastructure, the physical beauty of the town. That was their own reason. But of course, so this place it has a lot of narrative. It's very difficult to end in one day.
It's obvious. Tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prof, for this insightful discussion. So maybe to just quickly round off now. So we with all this that's happened and Jos became the Jos we have today. Now, unfortunately, along the line, Jos became popular for the wrong reason. Today, wherever I am, maybe most especially in southern Nigeria, when I mention I'm from Jos, from Plateau State, so I jokingly tell them that, will you like to visit Jos? No, I can't go there. Because of what? Because of how, the name has come to be, should we say, based on the things that have happened in terms of conflicts, So they tend to see Jos as a volatile place, where people just die anyhow, So, to close it up, this is Jos we are. So what's the way forward?
You said with the new CCMAS, you're going to be teaching history
Jos
in the university. And that takes me to, I think there was a workshop I attended, and we were told that states have the right to teach their local languages in their primary schools, but that's not being done. Now, my concern is we need people to know about their history. And if we're going to achieve that, it means we have to teach in primary schools and secondary schools, because it's not everybody who finishes primary, secondary school ends up studying history for him to now learn about the history of Jos. So what advice will you give the government or the people that are responsible for coming up with curriculums, especially the Plateau State government? What will you tell them concerning teaching language and then the history of their own people? Because like Jos is an urban area and people come in here. Some of them are somehow disjointed from their own history. In fact, some don't even go to the villages. All they can speak is Hausa and then English. So how can we, in one way or the other, teach them their own history? or make policies so that in Plateau State we can now start teaching history in primary and secondary schools?
Well, thank you very much. This is what the struggle of the Historical Society of Nigeria has brought. We started that struggle when Obasanjo came on board. It lingered until finally Buhari approved that history should be returned to the curriculum of UBE. This is where my project is coming from. So when history was returned to the curriculum, it has what the national curriculum has 70% of the curriculum, of the content. But they say 30% should be local history. So what our 773-page book on Plateau history that I just submitted is just to tell the story of each ethnic group and its history. So it is supposed to be taught in those localities. Now, anyone can take it and read it and find a general idea about their history.
Yes.
So it will not be limited to historians. I hope that we are able to raise the millions to be able to publish that book, because when I told the director or the GM...
I thought it was a TED Fund project.
Yes, but we claimed that we were going to publish the book, and we just budgeted 650,000 in 2020. Now it's impossible.
2020.
Yeah.
Now with the cost of...
yeah, so we are just going to produce limited copies. But what we did with that project was we went to each ethnic community and had interviews with them. And the ones I did community interviews. Some did private and personal interviews, but we collected data from the communities. And when we finished writing the drafts, we took the draft to PIDAN and say submit to all the ethnic groups. Let them find their own editors. Is this their history? Yes. Some returned, some did not return. So we said we'll not wait for those that didn't return. So those that returned, we used their corrections. Those that didn't return, we believe that what we concocted or what we wrote was correct. No history is final. Yes. So once you have that, you will find history of Ron, you will find history of Kulere, you will find history of Mushere, you will find Mangar, you will find Horom. All these ethnic groups listed in PIDAN are there. That's why we have 56 ethnic groups. So we inserted the Fulani because of their success with the jihad in Wasi and Kanam. So every ethnic group has its own history, and whether it's taught in primary school or not, or in secondary school or not, it is the responsibility of the members of the ethnic community to read that book and share the knowledge with their children. Photocopy the chapters relevant to their own ethnic community and make it their national history. And if there are any corrections to be made, they can do that. So the Historical Society produced this template that you shouldn't just be teaching national history. So for those in language, they should not also be teaching only national languages. They should also be teaching local languages. So Historical Society cannot fight all the battles. We have fought our own, we are successful. So we're hoping that each state will replicate what we have done and have the local histories of their communities. And in that case, anyone who is old enough to read can read that. Like I said, it's light reading. We wrote it in friendly language, not academic language. It doesn't have debates. It doesn't have debates because it's not academic. But I wrote a separate paper on the ethnic identity of the Jipal, the Chakfem, and the Miship. That one is academic and is published in a journal. That if you read that one, you will see that there are debates there. But this one is just the Mushere said they came from this place, they came from this place, they came from. So we narrated the story. At the end of the story, we'll summarize the story and say, based on their traditions of origin, it would appear that the Mushere or the Ron or the Moravul or the Mupun are a melting pot. So most of the ethnic groups in Plateau Central and Plateau South are melting pots. None of them came from one exact source. You will find some people who say we are indigenous. We didn't come from somewhere.
Especially in their own area.
Yeah, so they are the Dares community. So you cannot just say they must come from Borno whether they like it or. So if the ruling family says they came from Borno, the Dares clan didn't come from Borno. But today they are all Ron people. So that's why we call them melting pots. It's the same with the Gomai. Some are Jukun origin, some are Ngas origin. So, but if you go to the Gomai and ask them, where did they come from? They all say they came from Borno. Is that true? And so, like Mupun, we're the worst. In terms of origin, we came from 6 different places. Some are from Dai, his own place. Some are from your own area. That's my own clan. We call ourselves
there is
Jepun.
Dai in my district. There is Dai
Then
in
some
this place.
some are Jelbang. That means they are from Gomai stock. Some are Tambes. Some are Mutkop. Some are Difir. So we are all cut and paste. And what we want to show with that history is that if people come from Dai, Jelbang, Tambes, and 4 Mupun people and say they are one people, why is it difficult for Hausa, Yoruba, Igbo, and all the ethnic groups in Nigeria to live together as one? That's the story we're creating.
Wow, that's interesting. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, what a way to end this, Prof. I don't know if you have any closing remarks.
No, other than, I think he has landed very properly.
Okay.
Truly. And this, let's not throw away this, because the study of history is not going to end with our generation.
Exactly.
Yes, so all these stories of Ndai and, Deres or whatever, and so on and so forth. For now, this is where our state of knowledge has gotten to. Maybe such things will disappear. Maybe they will not. But if the project that they are on, if it succeeds, one hopes that it will give rise to local scholars who will probe these things more.
Deeper.
Are they accidental names, or are they specific quarters of people who came from a parent Dai or a parent Horop or a parent, slaughtered in some other place, and so on and so forth. But I would prefer the way it has ended in terms of no matter the degree of these distinctions that we try to project. In contemporary Nigeria, they see themselves as Mopun, as Moragul, as Gas, and so on, which is what I think is very important, because that is the working identity for their politics. So, if that be the case, why wouldn't such a thing work at the national level in terms of the unity of the Igbos, the Yorubas, the Hausas, and so on and so forth? Isekiris, these, myriad of tribes in
unity in diversity.
Exactly. I like that, the origin of that coinage is Richard Constitution in 1947.
Wow.
So I think he has ended very well. If all this expenditure and research is going to lead to this kind of thing, then it is, I think, worth it.
All right. Thank you so much. So we bring it to a close.